everyone, it's Cynthia from cynscraftingworld. I will be continuing with the messenger part 2. So let's carry on. When I entered my garden, I saw Mem sprawling on the stone doorstep. He eyed me sideways and flopped his tail. "Are you not mortified, you idiot dog?" I said, looking about the upper windows for Liz. Mem rolled over on his back and raised one deprecating forepaw, as though to ward off calamity. "Don't act as though I was in the habit of beating you to death," I said, disgusted. I had never in my life raised whip to the brute. "But you are a fool dog," I continued. "No, you needn't come to be babied and wept over. Liz can do that if she insists. But I am ashamed of you, and you can go to the devil." Mem slunk off into the house, and I followed, mounting directly to my wife's boudoir. It was empty. "Where has she gone?" I said, looking hard at Mem, who had followed me. "Oh, I see, you don't know. Don't pretend you do. Come off that lounge. Do you think Liz wants tan-colored hairs all over her lounge?" I rang the bell for Catherine and Fine, but they didn't know where Madame had gone. So I went into my room, bathed, exchanged my somewhat grimy shooting clothes for a suit of warm, soft knickerbockers, and after lingering some extra moments over my toilet, for I was particular, now that I had married Liz, I went down to the garden and took a chair out under the fig trees. Where can she be? I wondered. Mem came sneaking out to be comforted, and I forgave him for Liz's sake, whereupon he frisked. "You bounding cur," I said. "Now what on earth started you off across the moor? If you do it again, I'll push you along with a charge of dust shot." As yet I had scarcely dared think about the ghastly hallucination of which I had been a victim, but how I faced it squarely, flushing a little with mortification at the thought of my hasty retreat from the gravel pit. "To think," I said aloud, "that those old women's tales of Max Fortin and Le Bihan should have actually made me see what didn't exist at all." I lost my nerve like a schoolboy in a dark bedroom, for I knew now that I had mistaken a round stone for a skull each time, and had pushed a couple of big pebbles into the pit instead of the skull itself. "By jingo," said I, "I'm nervous. My liver must be in a devil of a condition if I see such things when I'm awake. Liz will know what to give me." I felt mortified and irritated and sulky, and thought disgustedly of Le Bihan and Max Fortin. But after a while I ceased speculating, dismissed the mayor and chemist and the skull from my mind, and smoked pensively, watching the sun low dipping in the western ocean. As the twilight fell for a moment over the ocean and moorland, a wistful, restless happiness filled my heart, the happiness that all men know, all men who have loved. Slowly the purple mist crept out over the sea. The cliffs darkened, the forest was shrouded. Suddenly the sky above burned with the afterglow, and the world was alight again. Cloud after cloud caught the rose dye. The cliffs were tinted with it, moor and pasture. Heather and forest burned and pulsated with a gentle flush. I saw the gulls turning and tossing above the sandbar, their snowy wings tipped with pink. I saw the sea swallows shearing the surface of the still river, stained to its placid depths with warm reflections of the clouds. The twitter of drowsy hedge birds broke out in the stillness. A salmon rolled its shining side above tidewater. The interminable monotone of the ocean intensified the silence. I sat motionless, holding my breath as one who listens to the first low rumor of an organ. All at once the pure whistle of the nightingale cut the silence, and the first moonbeam silvered the waste of mist-hung waters. I raised my head. Liz stood before me in the garden. When we had kissed each other, we linked arms and moved up and down the gravel walks, watching the moonbeams sparkle on the sandbar as the tide ebbed and ebbed. The broad beds of white pinks about us were a-tremble with hovering white moss. The October roses hung all a-blue, perfuming the salt wind. "Sweetheart," I said, "where is Yvonne? Has she promised to spend Christmas with us?" "Yes, Dick. He drove me down from Plugat this afternoon. She sent her love to you. I am not jealous. What did you shoot?" "A hare and 4 partridges. They are all in the gun room. I told Catherine not to touch them until you had seen them." Now I suppose I knew that Liz could not be particularly enthusiastic over game or guns, but she pretended she was, and always scornfully denied it that it was for my sake and not for the pure love of sport. So she dragged me off to inspect the rather meager game bag, and she paid me pretty compliments and gave a little cry of delight and pity as I lifted the enormous hare out of the sack by the ears. "He'll eat no more of our lettuce," I said, attempting to justify the assassination. "Unhappy little bunny, what a beauty! Oh, Dick, you are a splendid shot, are you not?" I evaded the question and hauled out a partridge. "Poor little dead things," said Liz in a whisper. "It seems a pity, doesn't it, Dick? But then you are so clever." "We'll have them broiled," I said guardedly. "Tell Catherine." Catherine came in to take away the game, and presently Finn Leocard, Liz's maid, announced dinner, and Liz tripped away to her boudoir. I stood an instant contemplating her, blissfully thinking, "My boy, you are the happiest fellow in the world. You're in love with your wife." I walked into the dining room, beamed at the plates, walked out again, met Tregun in the hallway, beamed on him, glanced into the kitchen, beamed at Catherine, and went upstairs still beaming. Before I could knock at Liz's door, it opened, and Liz came hastily out. When she saw me, she gave me a little cry of relief and nestled close to my breast. "There is something peering in at my window," she said. "What?" I cried angrily. "A man, I think, disguised as a priest, and he has a mask on. He must have climbed up by the bay tree." I was down the stairs and out the doors in no time. The moonlit garden was absolutely deserted. Tregun came up, and together we searched the hedge and shrubbery round the house and out the road. "Jean-Marie," said I at length, "lose my bulldog. He knows you. And take your supper on your porch where you can watch. My wife says the fellow is disguised as a priest and wears a mask." Tregun showed his white teeth in a smile. "He will not care to venture in here again, I think, Monsieur Darel." I went back and found Liz seated quietly at the table. "The soup is ready, dear," she said. "Don't worry. It was only some foolish lout from Benelec. No one in St. Gilda's or St. Julien would do such a thing." I was too much exasperated to reply at first, but Liz treated it as a stupid joke, and after a while I began to look at it in that light. Liz told me about Yvonne and reminded me of my promise to have Herbert Stewart down to meet her. "You wicked diplomat," I protested. "Herbert is in Paris and hard at work for the Salon. Don't you think he might spare a week to flirt with the prettiest girl in Finistère?" inquired Liz innocently. "Prettiest girl? Not much," I said. "Who is then?" urged Liz. I laughed a trifle sheepishly. "I suppose you mean me, Dick," said Liz, coloring up. "Now I bore you, don't I?" "Bore me? No, Dick." After coffee and cigarettes were served, I spoke about Tregun, and Liz approved. "Poor Jean. He will be glad, won't he? What a dear fellow you are." "Nonsense," said I. We need a gardener. You said so yourself, Liz." But Liz leaned over and kissed me, and then bent down and hugged Mem, who whistled through his nose in sentimental appreciation. "I am a very happy woman," said Liz. Mem was a very bad dog today, I observed. Poor Mem, said Liz, smiling. When dinner was over, and Mem lay snoring before the blaze, for the October nights were often chilly in Finistère, Liz curled up in the chimney corner and her embroidery, and gave me a swift glance from under the drooping lashes. You look like a schoolgirl, Liz, I said teasingly. I don't believe you are 16 yet. She pushed back her heavy burnished hair thoughtfully. Her wrist was as white as surf foam. Have we been married 4 years? I don't believe it, I said. She gave me another swift glance and touched the embroidery on her knee, smiling faintly. I see, said I, also smiling at the embroidered garment. Do you think it will fit? Fit? Repeated Liz. Then she laughed. And I persisted. Are you perfectly sure that we shall need it? Perfectly, said Liz. A delicate color touched her cheeks and neck. She held up the little garment, all fluffy and misty lace and wrought with quaint embroidery. It is very gorgeous, said I. I don't use your eyes too much, dearest. May I smoke a pipe? Of course, she said, selecting a skein of pale blue silk. For a while I sat and smoked in silence, watching her slender fingers among the tinted silks of the thread of gold. Presently she spoke. What did you say your crest is, Dick? My crest? Oh, something or other rampant on something or other. Dick, dearest, don't be flippant. But I really forget. It's an ordinary crest. Everybody in New York has them. No family should be without them. You are disagreeable, Dick. Send Josephine upstairs for my album. Are you going to put the crest on the whatever it is? I am, and my own crest too. I thought of the Purple Emperor and wondered a little. You didn't know I had one, did you? She smiled. What is it? I replied evasively. You shall see. Ring for Josephine. I rang, and when Finn appeared, Liz gave her some orders in a low voice, and Josephine trotted away, bobbing in her white coiffed head with the Bien Madame. After a few minutes she returned, bearing a tattered, musty volume from which the gold and blue had mostly disappeared. I took the book in my hands and examined the ancient emblazoned covers. Lilies, I exclaimed. Fleur-de-lis, said my wife demurely. Oh, said I, astonished, and opened the book. You have never before seen this book? Asked Liz with a touch of malice in her eyes. You know I haven't. Hello, what's this? Oh, so there should be de before Trebec. Liz de Trebec. Then why in the world did the Purple Emperor... Dick! Cried Liz. All right, said I. Shall I read about Sieur de Trebec, who rode the Saladin's tent alone to seek for medicine for St. Louis? Or shall I read about... what is it? Oh, here it is, all down in black and white, about the Marquis de Trebec, who drowned himself before Alva's eyes rather than surrender the banner of the Fleur-de-Lis to Spain. It's all written here. But, dear, how about that soldier named Trebec, who was killed in the old fort on the cliff yonder? He dropped the deux, and the Trebecs since then have been Republicans, said Liz, all except me. That's quite right, said I. It is time that we Republicans should agree upon some feudal system. My dear, I drink to the king, and I raised my wine glass and looked at Liz. To the king, said Liz, flushing. She smoothed out the tiny garment on her knees. She touched the glass with her lips. Her eyes were very sweet. I drained the glass to the king. After a silence, I said, I will tell the king stories. His Majesty shall be amused. His Majesty, repeated Liz softly. Or hers. I laughed. Who knows? Who knows, murmured Liz with a gentle sigh. I know some stories about Jack the Giant Killer, I announced. Do you, Liz? I? No, not about the giant killer, but I know all about the werewolf and Jean Laflamme and the man in purple tatters and, oh dear, I know lots more. You are very wise, said I. I shall teach His Majesty English. And I Breton, cried Liz jealously. I shall bring playthings to the king, said I. Big green lizards from the gorse, little grey mullets to swim in glass globes, baby rabbits from the forest of Kerselec. And I, said Liz, will bring the first primrose, the first branch of aubepine, the first jonquil, to the king, my king, our king, said I, and here was peace in finesse. I lay back, idly turning the leaves of the curious old volume. I'm looking, said I, for the crest. The crest, dear? It is a priest's head with an arrow-shaped mark on the forehead. On a field, I sat up and stared at my wife. Dick, whatever is the matter? She smiled. The story is there in that book. Do you care to read it? No, shall I tell it to you? Well then, it happened in the Third Crusade. There was a monk whom they called the Black Priest. He turned apostate and sold himself to the enemies of Christ. As Sieur de Trevec burst into the Saracen camp at the head of only 100 lances and carried back the priest way out of the very midst of their army. So that is how you come by the crest? I said quietly. But I thought of the branded skull in the gravel pit and wondered. Yes, said Liz. The Sieur de Trevec cut the Black Priest's head off, but first he branded him with an arrow mark on the forehead. The book said it was a pious action, and the Sieur de Trevec got great merit by it. But I think it was cruel, the branding, she sighed. Did you ever hear of any other Black Priest? Yes, there was one in the last century here in St. Gildas. He cast a white shadow in the sun. He wrote in the Breton language, chronicles too, I believe. I never saw them. His name was the same as that of the old chronicler and of the other priest, Jacques Sour. Some said he was a lineal descendant of the traitor. Of course, the first Black Priest was bad enough for anything, but if he didn't have a child, it need not have been the ancestor of the last Jacques Sour. They said this one was a holy man. They say he was so good he was not allowed to die, but was caught up to heaven one day, and Liz was with believing eyes. I smiled. But he disappeared, persisted Liz. I'm afraid his journey was in another direction, I said jestingly, and thoughtlessly told her the story of the morning. I had utterly forgotten the masked man in her window, but before I finished I remembered him fast enough and realized what I had done as I saw her face whiten. Liz, I urged tenderly, that was only the same clumsy clown's trick. You said so yourself. You are not superstitious, my dear? Her eyes were on mine. She slowly drew the little gold cross from her bosom and kissed it, but her lips trembled as they pressed the symbol of faith. That was the end of part 2, and part 3 is very long. So we shall leave it there for tonight. I hope you enjoyed part 2. It's getting pretty excited, and I think Liz is pregnant. What do you think? Let me know. All right. We shall see you next time. Bye.